Okay. Wow, this is amazing. Hi, everybody. My name is Sono Osato, and welcome to my studio and welcome to the Gutter Blood Talk Show. I'm so happy to see you all. I have my lines printed out really big, you know, because I get nervous. That way I won't lose my place. Anyway, first of all, I want to say that I don't do this alone. There's a huge crew that has helped me, and there's many people to thank. Most importantly, we now have some sponsors. We have Lori and Mark Frick, which is actually we have Ivysaur Contemporary. Kevin is with us tonight. We have Annie Williams. She actually lives in New Jersey. Thank you, Annie, but she's watching, right? Annie's watching. And Dio Traverso, who is actually a key part of our AV team, but he had a gig tonight that he had to do. We love Dio. He is I should mention that one of the reasons why he is a sponsor is because it's because of him that we can now live switch between cameras and also Christos. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But he forked out some cashola to set up that amazing pit back there. So we love you, Dio. For you that are out in YouTube land, you can go to our IG page or our talk show page on Gutter Blood on the Wall to learn more about the show. You can also keep this going by donating. You can help us keep it going by donating. And we now actually have a Gutter Blood Talk Show Venmo page. I'm slowly getting my act together. I do want to do a really big call out to the team, to the AV team. They kind of emerged like wildflowers or fairy dust out of the earth. It was amazing. And they are here under their own volition, so I'm really grateful. We have Jim Hickox back there. Next to him is Jacob Perez. Up here we have Christos Papiakas, who's been with me since the beginning. He actually got the whole thing started by inviting me to a party. We have Alex Peña right over here. Up there we have Jasmine Platz. I met her because she actually reached out to me. I didn't know who she was. She reached out to me via email about a month ago and volunteered. And she's a professor at Texas State. I was like, well, you know, asking a professor if they could sit up and run a camera. But, and she brought in her friend Alex. So I'm just really grateful. It's amazing. And the other person please stand up, Rita. I'll just say really quick, when I first moved here, I didn't know anybody. I started throwing parties. I named it the Gutter Blood Happy Hour. Then I started showing artists on this wall, you know, throwing big parties, including Rita. And she just started to help me. And then the crazy idea of the talk show. She's been by my side the entire time. She's right next door. So there's a bunch of stuff in this room that that's hers. So anyway, we're going to get going. Okay. The history of the Austin art world, especially in the past 50 years, is ocean deep in people and stories. And there is just no way it can be given its due in a show or two. But we are going to pull up a few soil samples and get this party started. So I am truly grateful to the folks who have agreed to be up here to help us crack open the vault. We're going to start with Chris Cowden down here. She's been the executive director of Women in Their Work since 1986. And I am incredibly thrilled that we have Robert Ferris. Senior arts editor of the Austin Chronicle from 1993 to 2021. Just a little while. Not that long. We have Annette Carlozzi, who is a beloved curator based in Austin with a little in and out since 1979. And I'll stop standing in front of him over here. Last but but not least, we have Robert Boland. He has been an Austin artist since the mid-2000s, and he is the co-founder and co-owner of Vault Fine Art Services, which is absolutely superlative since 2012. Also, I want you to mark your calendars, all of you, and for whoever's tuning in on YouTube, for our second show in this storytelling series coming up in 2 weeks on June 25th. We have Jaime Castillo, who's right up here up front. We have Aaron Cunningham, who's way back there. We have Rebecca Marino, who's also way back there. And we have Naomi Schleck, who's right there. All right, so y'all got your Austin history timeline? Okay, good, because we're going to start with a pop quiz.
No. I can't remember.
I'm kidding. Okay. But we are going to start with 2 cross sections a generation apart. Because the thing that's so cool about this timeline when I first started working on it is it's like strata. It's like this, it's sort of this undulating, and you can kind of cut it in so many different ways looking at it. And this is just for fun. So in 1987, when Sean Gallagher, the founder and executive director of Collab Projects, was around 3 years old.
Looks good. Nice.
You're welcome.
He hasn't changed
He did
much.
say this is okay. I ran my lines last night and I sent him a video and I said, "Are you sure you're cool with this?" And he goes, "Yeah, let it rip." I'm like, "Okay." If we dropped in among the highlights, and this is in 1987, if we dropped in a time machine, just dropped you in down on Congress Street, among the highlights would be the Elizabeth Ney Museum, Laguna Gloria. This is a partial list, by the way. The Texas Fine Arts Association, the Huntington Art Gallery, Shoal Creek Gallery, Austin Art Alliance, the Armadillo Art Fair, Women in Their Work, the Black Arts Alliance, the Davis Art Gallery, the Doherty Art Center, Pine Street Station Studio, Wally Workman Gallery, Ardmore Gallery and Frame, La Peña, the George Washington Carver Museum, which I think just started in 1980, the Mexicarte Museum, Projects Gallery, Galeria Sin Fronteras, Thornton Road Studios, which is where we're sitting at the moment, the Austin Film Society, Art in Public Places, the Austin Chronicle, with Flatbed Press coming up right around the corner. 21 years later, in 2008, when Sean was 24 years old, and he founded the preeminent Collab Projects in his backyard on the east side. Get this one. Eye candy, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, class, pay attention now. So, we had, the terrain was expanded. This is a partial list of things that had kind of come up right around that time. Big Medium, Fluent Collaborative, Mass Gallery, OK Mountain, East and West Austin Studio Tours, Art House, Ken Tanker Magazine, Domi Books, the Blanton Art Museum, Los Outsiders, Landmarks at UT, New East Arts Gallery, Punk Project, Austin Museum of Art, Sodalitas, Art Palace, the Fusebox Festival, Laura Reynolds Gallery, Baum Road Studios, the Texas Biennial, the Asian American Cultural Center, the Mexican American Cultural Center, D. Berman Gallery, Creative Research Laboratory, Gallery Lombardi, Respect Gallery, Umlauf Sculpture Garden, Diverse Arts, Flatbed Press, Coronado Print Studio, R.S. Levy Gallery, Leon Matrix Gallery, and Stephen Clark Gallery. And this is all just a partial list. So you can kind of see how it just started to flow. So that's my little stand-up routine, and we're going to get started. So we're just going to dive right into it. And I wanted to start with you, Chris. You told me this really amazing story. You came to Women in Their Work in 1986. And I was wondering if you could tell us about the days when you shared a phone and a mimeograph machine with 3 other organizations. That's one phone with 4 lines. who shared the phone? Where were you? And what did you all want to bring into being?
Well, sharing the phone was actually part of a movement, of a nationwide movement that started in the 70s. And that movement was everyone who was not a white male was inspired by the idea that they didn't have to be bitter or angry or depressed that they were not involved in existing art organizations. So what they decided to do was to go found their own art organization. So these were called alternative spaces, and it was all over the country, and it was just this kind of outpouring of energy and excitement and creativity. And so in 1979, Women in the Work went to the YWCA, which was at 2330 Guadalupe. And we rented 2 rooms, which were offices for women in their work, and a sponsored project at the time, which was the Black Arts Alliance. And Women in their Work and the Black Arts Alliance shared a phone system, a Xerox machine, and desks that were made out of doors that were put on sawhorses. And we didn't call it DIY then, it was scrounge. But at 2330 Guadalupe it became this real center. We rented from the YWCA the gym that they had, because it was the YWCA, and used it for dance studios, for rehearsal, for dance. So there was all of this activity and all this bustling, because the director of the Black Arts Alliance was Eloise Burrell, and she was a remarkable singer. So there were musicians, there were dancers, there were poets, there were artists, and coming in, going out, just full of energy. And what we later learned was there was also remarkable historic energy at 2330 Guadalupe, because in the 1960s, this YWCA had challenged segregation in a pharmacy that was on their land. It was on the property that they owned. And they were written up in the newspapers as the most radical YWCA in the South. And then in April of 1970 was the first public meeting of in Austin of LGBTQIA people in Austin, was at 2330 Guadalupe. So it was quite a place.
Yeah.
So then there was a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together, because people didn't have spaces. They relied on other people to work together. And so there was presentation at Laguna Gloria, at Zach Scott, at Elizabeth Ney, at UT. There was a lot of interaction with UT professors. And there was a lot of cross-pollination, and just looking back, like Sylvia Roscoe performed at a Women in the Work event in 1977, and she was on the board of Women in the Work, and then founded her organization in 1984, Mexicarte. And then the Black Arts Alliance received their nonprofit status in 1984, and we continued to present with them for 10 years. So that was the start.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, let's pop on down. So Robert joined us in the last talk show that we had, and he piped up. It was wonderful. Talking about the value of community and places that have come and gone that were really great. And in some of our emails back and forth, because Robert also was really instrumental. You brought up like hubs of community that meant a lot to you. And one of the things you brought up in particular in a letter was the Flatbed World headquarters, which was a space for over 20 years that was a hub of galleries. It included like Gallery Shoal Creek, the O2 Gallery, Creative Research Laboratory, Cambia Art, and Gallery 106, Respect Gallery, which actually just had a show at MOHA, Museum of Human Achievement. So that's a nice rollover. But I wanted to, because it was the end of the talk show and people were beginning to kind of disperse, and I just wanted to let you extrapolate a little bit.
Sure.
One of the nice things when Flatbed Press decided to open this space on East Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard was that there was a tremendous sense of continuity, in part with the name. Flatbed World Headquarters referenced Armadillo World Headquarters, which was a center of counterculture and culture in the 1970s. It was a space made out of an old army barrack on Riverside and Barton Springs Road, and it was a space where you could not only see rock and roll acts, but blues acts, jazz acts, country acts, ballet, pretty much anything that was a performing art was on the stage at the Armadillo back in the 70s. For Flatbed to assume that as part of its name meant not just riffing on something that's identified with Austin pop culture, but also, I think, a sense that anything and everything can be in this space. And it was a huge old industrial space on the east side that was being repurposed, which is also part of the continuity of the Austin art scene, visual arts and performing arts. We go to places where there are old buildings that aren't being used, haven't been used in years. We take them over and we turn them into something special where culture is created. And eventually somebody thinks that property is important enough to yank it away from us, and we lose that except in our memories and in the work that's created in those spaces. But Flatbed at that time had been around for 10 years. It was an extraordinary source of printmaking. I don't think anybody will argue with that at this point. And it needed its own home, but it decided not just to create a home for itself, but to create a home where other galleries could make their homes, and that's also, I think, a wonderful tradition. I do more theater work than anything else, but what I love about the theater spaces that have been made since I've been in Austin is they are always made for the company that runs the space, but it's always open to other spaces to work in. And so I think of a space like the Off Center, which was a space from the late 90s through the late 2010s, and the Rude Mechanicals, a great theater company that ran the space, made sure that lots of other companies could work in that space. And if you have memories of great theater at the Off Center, it's probably about shows that the Rude Mechanicals did and a lot of other companies that performed and worked in that space. So Flatbed was creating that for the visual arts community, and Sono listed a lot of the great spaces in there. I think it's really meaningful that you have Gallery Shoal Creek, which is a gallery that started in Austin in the 60s when there weren't very many visual arts galleries, loses its space and is able to go into Flatbed World Headquarters. It keeps its name because that's who Gallery Shoal Creek is, but it's in this umbrella of wonderful other spaces like Gallery 02, like Rexbeck, like, you know, I could spend all night listing the names of companies there. And it also becomes kind of a, you know, one of these wonderful one-stop cultural shopping spaces where it's like, oh, well, I may have been drawn down to come see what Flatbed is showing, but oh my God, look at this stuff they have on the wall. Oh, let me go see what Gallery Shoal Creek is doing. Let me go see. And then you find yourself seeing 5 shows in one afternoon. And they're equally wonderful. And fill you with a cultural experience and with memories that then make you want to go see more work by the artists being shown, makes you learn more about the curators, tunes you in maybe to a kind of work that you didn't know was being made in Austin. So that's really what I loved about Flatbed. As somebody who, although I can boast a BA from the University of Texas Department of Art and Art History, really spent more time doing work in the performing arts in the 80s and the 90s, but because of my position as arts editor at the Austin Chronicle, I was paying more attention to and writing about work in the visual arts scene as you moved into the late 90s and beyond that. So I got a real education, and I find myself with so many memories of so many artists, so many shows, so many people I then wanted to write about, I wanted to review their work, or I wanted to get other writers to write about their work because I felt like here's something important that's being created that more people in this city need to know about so they can see their work, buy their work, but also as we talk about and tell stories about what happened in the Austin art scene through the years, that there is a literal chronicle of the work that was being created at specific moments in time and across the timeline of everything that's been made in the Austin art scene through the years.
I'm curious because when I first got here, it was sort of the tail end. It was on 7th Street, right?
No, MLK.
MLK.
This was,
okay. Yeah, that's right. I remember that there was this wonderful kind of density, and I'm curious, like, were the galleries like buddies? Were they friends? Was there a community? Because it fosters, a milieu of people that are hanging out, and you can move that kind of density, which is really great, where you have a hub. So there's that kind of connectivity. But was there like a community among the galleries? Were they?
I wish I knew them well enough to say, but
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that, Jamie?
I mean, the Creative Research Lab had a big
Oh, that's-
space there
yes.
as an anchor tenant,
Yeah.
and we relied on galleries that were there for a long time, like Shoal Creek, but also Vale Allen, who showed up for a couple of years and had a space. And
Yeah.
so we all relied on each other, but shared a kitchen. So when you share a kitchen, you have to be better.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I remember sharing with CRL and Flatbed, always sharing the same space and negotiating on what rooms they were going to use for certain events, moving tables, sharing tables, and they were just like, yeah, it was like family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, like there's that continuity with what you were saying as well. And we'll get to that. Like I have more
Yeah.
questions up my sleeve.
I just want to add one last thing because I meant to mention it when I talked about the Armadillo World Headquarters. It's always associated with music, but actually the Armadillo Art Squad, which I think doesn't always get grouped into the Austin art history story. Jim Franklin, who basically brought the armadillo as an iconic
Yes.
character for the city, Michael Priest, Guy Juke, a lot of these folks, I can't think of other names right now, but the identity of the armadillo was linked to the posters that these guys created. And if you ever go back and look at a full catalog of the art that these guys created, they had their individual distinctive styles, but they were also incredibly versatile. Juke was maybe my favorite, but he could do cartoon characters that looked like they were out of a 40s animated feature, and then he could do these painfully photorealistic portraits of musicians who would come to play. And again, that's part of the history that you find. The acts of the armadillo survive because those artists made those posters saying who was going to perform there.
Yeah. That's great. So you got here, what year did you get here? In the 70,
I got here in 1979.
1979?
I'm not from here, but I've lived here twice, and it's my home. So, shall
Yeah.
I go into it, or do you want me
Yeah,
to?
what was it like when you got here?
Okay. I got here in 79. I was 25 years old. It was my first curatorial post. I had been in Minneapolis and in Washington, D.C., and that's worth mentioning only because in Washington for a year I had a fellowship at the National Endowment for the Arts, and I learned about Austin there, that out of all the cities in the United States, when the Arts Endowment was looking at populations of creatives, they weren't really called that then, but artists in a broadest sense, that Austin had the 6th largest population of creative people per capita in the United States, as that survey discovered that data. And so when I saw a job listing from a place called Laguna Gloria Art Museum, I am moving across the country, and I got there, and the poetry of the name was more than matched by the poetry of the place, Laguna Gloria, which hopefully everyone's been to. It had peacocks, it had palm trees. It was extraordinary, with a little downtown space even from the very beginning. I was hired by Lawrence Miller, who was the director then, who had turned the organization, which had existed from sometime in the 60s, into a true museum of contemporary art. No collecting, just exhibitions in the villa and in what he then acquired as some leftover downtown bank space as well. And I came and joined him, and we kind of blew up the exhibition program so that it would resonate in the community and across the country. One of the projects he had started, we ultimately came to call New Works by Austin Artists. It began with 2 rising stars. He'd selected them. I wasn't in town yet. Melissa Miller and Claudia Reese. Melissa's in the crowd.
Wave your hand.
That was about 1978 or no, early 1979, I think. And then I got there in the fall of 79, and after staying for 7 years, we had done 50 1 or 2 person shows of Austin artists and photographers. It was really important to us, it's always been important to me, to make the local arts community the root and the foundation of what the aspirational organizations want to do in connecting regionally, nationally, and internationally. And so it was its own little bubbling fountain of activity. And the parties, the openings were fabulous, and they brought members of the art community together who maybe didn't know one another. But we also brought, my first show was with Dan Flavin, who did light installations in each of the rooms of the old villa. They were extraordinary, just amazing. We brought a Robert Smithson show. I organized a Luis Jimenez show that went to New York. Peter Saul's show started there that went around the country. So rigorous work, but I bring up the work to say that it was a small organization. It didn't have many resources. The catalogs I have on my shelf are maybe 12 pages long, and maybe there's a color plate or 2 in them. You just did the work in the way that everybody who works in the arts does the work. You put your body into it, you pull your friends into it. You use the resources as widely as you can. Now in those days, Laguna Gloria was emerging as a kind of museum of contemporary art. It sat alongside a sister organization, the Texas Fine Arts Association, which had been longer still, had started out as, what colloquially is called like a watercolor society back in the day. But eventually it had become a membership organization for statewide artists who wanted to join for a fee, and that would get you the opportunity to enter juried exhibitions And so they brought in, starting with the directorship of Sandra Greger, who had started out at Laguna Gloria and then became the director of TFAA. They brought in New York curators to judge the shows so that people who were entering here would at least be seen by artists who mattered. Great example of that was Marcia Tucker being brought in by the original cohort of artists who are the roots of women in their work, to see the work of those artists. All of us, even at the museum, were constantly trying to bring other eyes and other influential eyes in, because we all felt there's amazing work being done here, people need to see it. And that it was possible to be able to do that kind of building, helping the local artists community, the Austin-based artists community, at the same time that you were trying to say, we show Robert Smithson, Dan Flavin did a work, a new work in our building. Those things are not separate, they can go together. So TFAA evolved and developed. Eventually, Sandra, as director, bought the Jones Center for about $300,000. Unbelievable. Can you even imagine? The whole room spits, right? I mean, that was amazing. And eventually that directorship turns over to Sue Grays, who comes in, and TFAA becomes Art House, and the Jones Center is completely and fully renovated by very important nationally known architects. And Laguna Gloria, to bring it back to my own days, and lots of people don't remember this, I spent 4 out of 7 years working with our team on a plan for a brand new museum building downtown. It was going to be designed by Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown. We did a nationwide search. That's who we chose. I was in their offices many times a year. We were developing those plans for that building, which was to sit on the block south of Republic Square. It's just now coming to fruition as something else. But it had been given to the museum by a team of developers back in their heyday wealthy moments, because they were trying to develop the area around that, and they knew, as you said, that if the arts move in, the values of the land will go up. So Laguna Gloria had received this incredible gift of part of a block of land south of the park, and
which had been for many years the Austin American Statesman
oh, I didn't
building.
know that. Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Statesman moved out, and Watson Casey, who
Watson
were the
Casey,
developers,
yeah.
who had also created a space called the Arts Warehouse.
And that's
And
where Metric Artes started,
Yeah.
and there were other community organizations working out of there. This was, I mean, really, we have to go back and try to figure this out, but these guys, for whatever tax breaks or whatever future revenue they thought they'd make, gave away a lot of land downtown to the arts community. And that plan, unfortunately, for the museum didn't happen, so the organization then shifted to a larger first floor bank building on Congress Avenue, and it changes its name from Laguna Gloria, because now it's going to be a big downtown presence, which then didn't happen, to the Austin Museum of Art. And its former director, Dana Fries Hansen, is here in the crowd somewhere as well. So lots of people who played lots of roles here. So that story evolves and develops, but the thing to know, because I know there's confusion and you had wanted to know about it, is that Elizabeth Ney is at first the first champion of dedicated space for the Austin community to come together in its celebration of contemporary art. That becomes Laguna Gloria, which houses TFAA as well. TFAA eventually moves downtown to the Jones Center. Laguna Gloria eventually decides that it can be 2 sites and starts as the Austin Museum of Art. TFAA becomes Art House. Austin Museum of Art and Art House eventually merge in about 2012, 2013, and they are the contemporary Austin. So if you just got here to town, that's what the contemporary Austin is. It's all these roots and threads and pieces that go way
And
back.
Elizabeth Ney is the mother of us all.
Yeah.
It every root line goes back to her
Indeed.
and her salons. Her salons.
Yeah. There you go.
I mean, that was one thing that stunned me. You know, this was a crazy idea when I just started. It just sort of like, okay, I'm going to sit down and write everything I can think of, and then I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. Jade and I talked early on. There was a lot of conversations I was having with different people, and I remember emailing you and saying, I did not know that there was this sort of, you know, ebb and flow that goes from Elizabeth Ney to the contemporary Austin. I did not know that, you know, because this is what's kind of cool about doing this, because I don't know hardly anything, so I'm like deeply curious about this myself, you know, and I really, really appreciate you kind of laying out the gestalt, because I also went down the rabbit hole of like reading all these different articles, and I started to just get like, ooh, you know, okay. So we're going to ask, you know.
Can I tell one more little
Yes,
bit? When you say
please
the
do.
word gestalt, I should have told this story. So when I, you know, if you come for an interview and then they offer you the job, sometimes you get the chance to come back so that you can find a place to live for when you actually start. And so it was, I think it was in that trip back before I'd actually started the work, one of my coworkers at Laguna Gloria, threw a little dinner party for me, and she invited lots of the arts leaders in town, and there were like 10 at that point in time. I mean, it was such a small town. And so John Bernardoni, who was the head of the Paramount, and people who were on the Arts Commission came, and a couple of actual performers were there, but it was like this really tight-knit group. They were delightful. It was a lovely dinner party. Our host had a child, and so we were kind of shooed out the door because it was a school night at a certain hour. And one person said, "Hey, let's all go swimming. Let's go to Hippie Hollow and go swimming." And so I'm like, yeah, sure, of course, great. So we all got on into the back of a pickup truck and drove from Travis Heights to Hippie Hollow, guess what, to go swimming, to go skinny dipping. And I went back to Washington. I hadn't left my job in Washington yet. And I said, oh my God, I have found heaven on earth. This is amazing. This is like all these arts leaders, and this is what they do. And you know, you've all had, you know, little bits of that here and there in our lives, still in Austin, right?
There's a lot
Like,
of stories.
only in
A lot,
Austin.
But there's a lot of stories that she has not elaborated on. So there could be like, I mean, not that event, but I mean many other
Yeah,
things
for sure,
about the
for
history.
sure. Yeah.
Well, we're going to come
Anyway.
back to that.
I'm done. Thanks.
I want to talk to you. So we had coffee the other morning, and it was really great. And this is jumping into the early 2000s. And there is some continuity here. Like, one of the things that I mentioned to Robert, just kind of looking at the ebbs and flows and how things kind of moved. It seemed, and I could be wrong, so you guys correct me if I am, but it seems to me like in the early 2000s, like the DIY thing really kind of started up its game. There was like OK Mountain, there was Art Palace, you know, and all the stuff that I had kind of listed when Sean was 24. It's kind of a different flavor. And so I wanted to ask you to talk about that a little bit more. Like you brought up, I had a little get-together for everybody a couple weeks ago, and Robert, you brought up like OK Mountain, which is something that I've heard a lot about. Philip brought it up, because Philip Niemeyer was one of the first people I called when I started working on this project. And he's like, OK Mountain, you know. So there's that, and then also you brought up, and I'll stop after this, you're like, there were pop-ups in buildings that were under construction.
Right.
You know, so there would be like the open electrical lines and, you know, water on, you know, just poured cement, and people are like, let's hang some art up here, you know, let's have a party. You know, so it's interesting that kind of, that texture, that era when you were emerging.
Yeah. So when I came to Austin, it was 2004. I came from Dallas, and so it was a little bigger of a scene, probably a lot bigger of a scene at the time, and a lot more established. And so there was much like, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. I come down here, and I'm like, one of the first shows I go to is this pop-up downtown Austin in a building that was in the middle of construction. There was extension cords everywhere. There's fans, there's projectors, there were speakers. The thing was, the day before, it just rained and it flooded 50% of the space. And people were like, that's cool! And they're just like walking through water and electrical lines. I'm like, going, this is not cool, but I like it. There's like clamp lights everywhere. It was great. It was great. And I think that was mostly run by grad students in UT. And so what I really experienced in the kind of extension in the next 10 years was this relationship between UT and Austin art scene.
Yeah.
And how that kind of developed each other and kind of fostered the art scene. I'm not sure how much of a community there is right now and how much that's fostering. But then when I came, people wanted their voice to be heard. People wanted the art scene to be greater than it was. People wanted to see and show what they were thinking, what they were doing, and yeah, to support each other in a way. Like we were talking about the galleries supporting each other at the same time. That was very much alive, where I didn't see that in other cities, which was a relief to me to come to Austin.
Yeah.
And so,
That's a good point.
and I think that DIY kind of culture, thought of like showing your own work and what you were doing, what your friends were doing, in weird empty houses, abandoned buildings, fields in the middle of nowhere. It was really inspiring to everybody, and it just kept going and growing and growing and growing. And they kept getting more and more and more professional, more cleaner. It's like more and more people wanted to come out. The collectors wanted to be a part of it. So they started collecting more and more and more, like little things like Mike Cheshire or Chris Mattson or Julie Blakesley. And so, yeah, I think that kind of evolved into OK Mountain, and then evolved even further into Art Palace, and just it raised the bar tremendously in Austin.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it continually changes, but I think it kind of reached its zenith in 2008, 2010, when the housing crisis came, and then things got too expensive, and people had to kind of switch gears and kind of started to decline. But I think from that period, we have great institutions like Big Medium, Women at Work still continued through. We have certain galleries that still kind of like kept going. They streamlined, they changed, and they kept going, and they started growing again.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
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 And like CoLab is still with us.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
was founded in,
I mean-
when was that founded, Leslie? Yeah, 2008. That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
As I said
I mean-
before. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's in those times of crisis that things get started. It's like,
Yeah.
let's start again. Let's build this thing back up.
Yeah.
Because it is that DIY kind of mindset and energy that is necessary. Yeah, to keep things going even when there's turmoil.
Yeah, it was interesting after we had the coffee. I looked at the timeline again, and by the way, I should mention that at the end of the timeline on the last page, if there's any mistakes or things that should be added, or the dates are wrong, or dates, just email me. We'll fix it. The more people who come in and contribute, the better. I want it as round as possible. But I noticed that, like, when you look, you see patterns, you
Yeah.
know? It's laid up in strata, kind of. I would really love to kind of lay the line out, so you start to, in a flow chart. So you actually really start to feel its plasticity. But I noticed that nothing was established in 2009.
Yeah.
According to the timeline.
Right.
But then, like, in 2010 and 11, something else started to pick up. So it was
Yeah.
like, and I never really, being a newbie, I didn't know any of this, and having coffee with Robert was like how some people, there was this dispersion. People dispersed, they had to regroup, Some went like Art Palace went to
Houston.
Some people regrouped, came back around. Mass kind of regrouped.
Yeah, Mass was another great one that started during that time.
Yeah, Mass.
I mean, I remember sweeping and mopping the floors, and there's a big, huge grease trap. That was absolutely disgusting. It was just like smell of putrescence.
At the blue.
At the Blue Hangar,
were
right
you
next
there?
to, I mean, you know, yeah, Blue Theater, Blue Genie. Yeah, Aaron
Blue Genie.
Cunningham remembers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, if you look at the timeline and you overlay it on the like a financial timeline of the United States, right? 2008 hits, people start to get really scared. Things get shut down. Things start to crash in 2009. Things in Austin, luckily, we just plateaued 2010, and then it started to increase again 2010, 2011,
Yeah.
which kind of matches how and what we're doing here.
You know, one of the things that's interesting when you talk about strata and parallels is that Austin is a city of people who've come here from someplace else.
Right.
You know, lots of places are not. Austin is. Most people are from somewhere else. The artist community as well has tended to constantly renew itself. Some of that are the universities that are bringing students in. Back before that year, 2008 or so, when things were cheaper here and you could live here reasonably, people's friends would come in from RISD or San Diego or wherever, and so, you know, artists drew artists, and that was constantly sort of overturning itself, and people would stay for 5 years and then they'd move on too. So in ways that may not be quite as similar, like Dallas probably wasn't like that. You know, the North Texas artists I know are like, they're there, they've been there. This is always turning over, and I think that dynamism is both a credit to the community, but it's also a challenge to the community as well.
I also think that it was really one of the things that's about Austin is that back in the day there were so many artists and artists would stay, and there were all of these small spaces and middle-sized spaces, and they were all thriving. But we really didn't have a museum that could fulfill, that had the space to fulfill its mission. So it was kind of like the Headless Horseman. You know, we had all of this here, and then we didn't have the museums that wanted to fulfill their mission. They needed space. And so then when we had such a boom in Austin, we got these museums, but then the bottom fell out and artists had to, it was so much more expensive, and so many spaces went under, left, couldn't find a place. And so it's kind of like the reverse. And so now I think we're trying to build it up again.
But it makes me also think there's, what is it? Mark Twain says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back earlier, I mentioned this to Annette, that 1984, 1985 sticks in my mind, even as somebody who was not paying as much attention to the visual arts scene at the time. But I remember what a big deal it was when Melissa Miller gets picked for the Venice Biennale, and Bob Levers around that same time gets picked, and it's also the time when there's the first arts bond election, where there's 14 million on the bond for a new downtown museum for Laguna Gloria, a new theater space for Zach Scott, and was it the Carver? I think there was like another million or 2 million for the Carver. Austin overwhelmingly votes in favor of the arts bonds. So that's a big deal because we're still a very small, more amateur than professional city at that point. But that's also the year Mexicarte gets started, the Arts Warehouse is going, and then 3 years later, real estate collapses, and all of that goes away.
Right.
And you have a lot of people who were members of big arts institutions or companies, and they go away at the same time. So it all, you know, you see this, if you go back far enough, you see this happening again and again, these cycles of really great growth and activity, and then economic forces that shut it down for a little while,
Yeah.
and then it comes back.
But a lot of spaces that collapsed, like Robert Barnstone owned a lot of
Oh,
buildings,
yeah.
and he used to be on the city council. And when he went into bankruptcy, a lot of his buildings became available, and a lot of art organizations moved in. So there was there's that.
Yeah.
So I mean, revenge. So I mean, they often gentrify the arts out, but the arts sometimes can come back.
Well, we're essentially rats, and we go into empty spaces
make them
and
nice.
take them over.
Yeah. I wanted to like pull back because Chris and I've talked numerous times, and you've been keep telling me about where we are at Thornton Road Studios, and you brought up a beautiful quote. Do you remember?
Oh, well, I was surprised to see how Thornton Road is as it was in the 90s. And there were so many artists here, and it was so active, and everybody learned from everybody, and yeah, like, because there was furniture makers and painters and welders, and there were so many different skills that went on. But what it reminded me of was a poem by T.S. Eliot, where he says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And here we are at Thornton Road. And in the 90s, I mean, I do think there's so much has risen. I mean, it's not, we're so much better. I mean, we really are so much better.
I mean, as a newbie, you know, and I think I'm slowly working out of being an interloper. But the thing that really struck me, because I came here just to chill out, you know.
Obviously.
I was I was bi-coastal, and I was about to lose my frickin' mind, and then I decided to like take a sublet here for a couple months, and then I found Thornton Road. I met Rita, who's been here. You moved here in 83. I came in for an East-West studio tour, you know, because I just live right up the street, conveniently located next to Cindy's Keep Texas Sexy. So I wandered down here, and you and I hit it off immediately, you know, and I just didn't leave. I'm still here. But the thing that really struck me, and this is tying in, you know, is this kind of scrappiness, that there is this, and you brought it up, and it's been brought up, like, Annette joined us for the last show that we had that was about the state of art writing here. And you were saying, you know, a lot of people are churning through this churning, but I think it's also, you know, our core of what we are. But it really struck me that there's a resilience that's very, very different than a city that has that kind of infrastructure of old money. It's a different kind of system.
I came back a second time because it was, to me, of all the places I ended up living, and my main interest is in audience engagement. I just thought the audience here was so smart and so interesting and so informal and spontaneous, and you know, there's a different character to the kinds of conversations that were happening here even than, you know, other places I'd lived that sort of had that reputation. And so there were family reasons and other reasons for coming back, and I got to work on the building of the new Blanton, which was another sort of aspirational, we can do it, will it be just for the university or for the community too, and huge experiment. But I think that just speaks to the fact that we can continue to find things that spark the imagination and that give enough support to the struggle that it's worth continuing, you know, it's worth continuing. And the other part I like off the top of my head now is every circle is different. I mean, look who's in the room here, and you're all part of separate circles and they overlap. It's like 20 Venn diagrams all put together. And that's a really great thing too, because other communities are more fixed in the way that relationships develop.
There's a toothiness here. There's this kind of porousness that's toothy,
porous,
which I love.
sure.
I mean, there's, the being porous, you have, I'm a sculptor and a painter, so it's like, but, when something's really porous, you do have like ragged edges. You have stuff that's it's not slick.
Yeah.
It's tooth. And I've used that word a lot, because I've written a lot of copy about Austin, particularly pertaining to gutter blood, and I'm like, you try to come up with the right adjectives, right? Adjectives are everything, but I'm like, toothy. It's toothy. I have one more question, and I thought it'd be nice because everybody's faces are really lit up. I want to kind of bring in some stuff, but I think this is layering into what we've kind of opened up, which is, and this is another thing of noticing, looking at the timeline, was sort of the continuity of how one kind of ethos moves into another ethos. Some, Women in the Work has been here since 1978.
78.
78. That's remarkable. And the artists that you fostered, and there's just so much texture of how it's turned around. And it also seems to me that what came before, laid a foundation for what came after it. Like, Leslie, do you think that there was some inspiration and collab of what was around it when it emerged? Yeah, there's like a relationship between elders and youngers, or there's something. I'm kind of like, blah, blah, blah. But you guys know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
I mean, the speaker collab, it was also trying to fill a niche because it was a point in time when there was a lot of kind of turnover happening. We didn't have a lot of spaces. And so when collab first started, we did a show a week, every Sunday.
Right.
You knew there was a collab, you'd come over and there'd be something new. It was insane, and it lasted way too long. We evolved into something else. But yeah, it has been this sort of fill a niche kind of space for a long time. And to the point of finding a space, now we're in a fucking Woolburg, right? Like, so it's
Right.
It's a true testament to a lot of what has happened in Boston. It's like we just find what we can and we make it work and we do really good things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is one of the things that I do think that is a continuity with that sense. You're like, oh man, I've got some stories about some parties.
Well,
It was the time, it was the era.
I don't know, is there anything that you would dare tell us? Like one?
no, I
All right.
But
yeah, she worked at the archives. You can mention it.
Yeah.
Well, but speaking to that and going back to the Elizabeth Ney idea is when you open the space for other people, when you bring in people who aren't part of your specific circle, something's going to spark. Maybe not the
Right.
first time, maybe not the second, but eventually people are going to want to talk to each other and share ideas, and something bigger will be created. And I think, again, when I look back at spaces on this sheet and other times and other communities in the art scene here, what people remember and what they talk about are the spaces, because the spaces were open to more than one group. And I think openness is part of the continuity,
Yeah.
along with the sort of desire to innovate, desire to try something new. And when you have an audience that's interested in what's new, then there's a great sense of collaboration there between the people who are making the art and the people who want to see the art.
And also, not only that, also the creators of the space. Because
Yes.
if you look down the list, you're like, oh, this person was in this one, this one, this one, this one, and oh, and then it flipped, and then these people were this, and so that it was like the people
Yeah.
that were creating the spaces were a part of all the spaces. So how could they not be
Yeah.
collaborative? Like, because
Yeah.
they're fighting against themselves. You're like,
Yeah. There's so much kind of movement. Like when I saw that Respect Gallery was, I saw the show at Moha. Kevin brought me there. We were tooling around. And then discovered, because I didn't know really what Respect Gallery was. And then I started working on this, and I'm like, oh, wow, that is so cool. That it was like came back and pulled it up, and, there just seems to be so much of that, and you guys, that's one of the things that I'm feeling. Am I kind of touching on something? I think that was like one of my questions that I wanted to wrap up with, was like, not wrap up, but, because I would like to open up a little bit, but sort of the roots of Austin, how it stays with us, our character, and that's one of the things that I just kind of noticed. And a lot of it is the strings of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, there could be a whole nother flowchart of just people, you
Yeah.
know. It's,
Yeah. As long as the people keep at it, keep the spirit going,
yeah.
and keep being inspired by each other, inspiring each other, building on each other,
Yeah.
then the roots are going to always be there.
Yeah.
Because it's inspirational, and then those people get inspired and they build on top of that.
Mhm.
And those people are collaborating again, building on top of that, collaborating again. And so, yeah, as long as the people keep getting inspired and keep working together, keep being open.
Well, to that point, and you said this earlier, but just to underscore it, that's why doing something like this is so important. When we were doing crit group for so many years, and there's lots of crit group people in the room, the constant request was, we need more conversations. We need more actual dialogue about art in this community, because maybe going to openings isn't the right place for that to happen. Maybe there need to be more kind of serious places, or places where we can sit down and drink as opposed to stand up and drink. What's the difference? What condition can you shift to make it more comfortable? But what you're doing is really important, because it does raise the question.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
I would like to open up, because it's really great watching everybody's faces, because I've seen, like, Beverly, your face is just like.
That's just your face.
That's just her face. That's true, too.
I was just thinking, actually, Chronicle was talking about the Thornton Road Studios, where we had studios here in the 90s. And I was just wondering how many other people here had studios in Thornton Road in the 90s or later. Because I so relate to what you're talking about with regard to community.
Yeah, yeah. It's been, you've told me a lot of stories. Virginia Fleck had a studio here. Leon and Stella were telling me I needed a new car with AC, and I really wanted a Prius, to be I can't afford like a total electric car. And your buddies, Mo, yeah, and they had a studio here.
Kathleen Ash.
Kathleen
Laura
Ash.
Garethwood.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and Mo was telling me stories about how everybody would meet at the picnic table that's still there, and have lunch.
Actually, Rob Peoples, who used to own People's Gallery, had a woodworking studio here.
Yeah. Can you feel it? No? But I mean, I did want to open this up, because this room is full of, I gotta say, this room is full of really amazing people. And I'm really grateful. I love that it is a circle, and that there's a connection between who's up here, and any one of you could be up here. When I started working on this, I'm like, I could have like 200 people up here, It's like, but I want to open it up. Do any of you have? There you go, Erin. Oh, sorry, and you'll be next.
Just like one super quick thing that I thought was super fascinating when I was doing the archive project that I mentioned during the last Everblood talk, but I did kind of like the archive history reach back of the contemporary Austin specifically, like all the way to the beginning. And in the early 90s, when they were incorporating as Austin Museum of Art, it initially was actually, Austin Museum of Art was supposed to be Laguna Gloria Art Museum, the Carver Museum, and the Mexican American Cultural Center as one institution. And that was going to be the Austin Museum of Art.
Wow.
And I really was only able to find it on like one piece of paper ever, but that was really the initial would have been 1993. And so I don't know exactly what happened, but
I wasn't here then. I was gone for a decade, so I don't know that. That is amazing. But there was also a moment that I was thinking of recently when Larry Faulkner, who was the president of UT for a while, at the point when the Blanton, we were building the building, it wasn't open yet, and a MOA, it was before you, the Blanton's building, yeah. Oh, which of the many? Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah.
We've been through both.
The chapel or the big building. It was before you were at MOA. I think it was when Elizabeth Ferrer was there. But the institution was having some problems financially, and it was looking like, you know, the second iteration, the Glickman building, was not going to happen. So Faulkner, you know, king on high as the president of UT, very helpfully suggests that perhaps MOA would like to merge with the Blanton, since we're building a building anyway. So there were, you know, there are moments, like I witnessed that one.
Like shotgun weddings.
You found it. Yeah.
Which is actually how the Paramount and the State Theater got
Yes,
to be
exactly.
a
You know,
duo.
and we're all going, no, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, yours is in a secret memo.
Yeah.
Who knows what went on?
Connie, you
Well, I wanted to say, you know, when Robert was bringing up about that time of, you know, growth, that also, that was the time when the city voted, or the citizens voted for 1% for the arts. And so we have
Oh,
more
yeah.
public places around
Right.
because of that.
Right.
So, you know, that idealism, you know, that the love of the arts, you know, all of those things kind of bubbled up at the same time. And the only other thing that I want to mention that is Chuck Cooper in Air Gallery.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
see him on that gallery on the list.
Oh, it should be, is it?
oh, Eric's not on there?
It was in,
Or Patrick Gallery. Patrick Gallery.
right. Just
Okay.
send those things in.
Yeah, just send them in.
I
and
haven't
we'll put
done
it on
my
there.
part, yeah.
Yeah, because I also don't have the warehouse on there either. Oh, which one of you want? Let's go right to left.
I just wanted to add to the idea of Austin roots. I think that one thing that happens in our like constant contraction and expansion in our community is the fact that we have such a tight knit art community, and there is a system of mentorship. The fact that when I was here as a young practitioner, I could call Annette Carlozzi and ask for help or like be part of an install with Langston is huge, and I think that we all recognize that, and we are all very lucky to have that in our arts community. That like there are people that we can look to mentor us or be there for us if we have questions. And so I think that that's also something that kind of perpetuates this idea of like continually having these roots that are very Austin and very particular.
Yeah.
And that's something really special that we have.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's not as easy.
It's not as easy.
Yeah.
Access is harder.
Jamie, did you have something?
I just wanted to respond to Robert's comment about saying that from his point of view, even though he wrote about shows for 30 years, that it was the spaces. Because I was about to ask him, what are some shows that stand out for you? But then I thought, that's kind of a foolish question. And then he almost kind of, went over that when he said it was about the spaces and the history of the spaces and people that made the spaces, and of course the artists that showed their art. That's the real like juice,
Yeah.
That it's like this history of the spaces and all the artists that show there and the family that creates. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah. You can't describe it with any, singularity.
Right.
Well, the story of electric cords has to be nostalgic for alternative spaces.
Right.
People who would open their homes and put up shows in their
Right.
private homes. That was in Kansas City. But here, living rooms were stages for performances. And I fell in some Vaseline on somebody's wood floor. Here. So crazy, but that's youth culture. And I don't want to hang my paintings in a laundromat, but I would.
Only if there's Vaseline.
Good to get that on the record.
Yeah.
Jim?
question for this group. I just was thinking about, I was recently kind of bragging to someone about how there's so many females in director roles now in the arts community, and just thinking back to this overview, do you feel like there's been a period where you could say, yes, I remember when almost every big and little arts institution was female run, or I don't know. I'm just wondering if that ebb and flow of women running some of our spaces
Do you want to
has
talk?
been different
'Cause I
in other
would
places.
It's not specific to here. The field itself eventually becomes predominantly female-led, both because the arts are a very exquisite form of transactional community building, and because the pay's pretty low.
Yeah, there you go.
And because a creative lifestyle offers more flexibility. So the field, when I was coming up in my training, there were nothing but male directors of everything. And I said, well, I'm going to change that someday. And the generation of people that are my age came through and started shifting it. I mean, you're among them. And then now it's predominantly female-led institutions. So I think it's a historical shift. It's not specific to this town at all, but it is specific to the arts, I think. Yeah.
Could you feel a different energy when that shift happened here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
tell us about it. I'm sure. I'm pretty sure there was an energy, but did
Well,
you
there were
feel like
different kind of people
I
shown.
speak to that.
Different kind of people
Yeah.
shown.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, the agendas broaden tremendously, yeah. But I also think culturally, you know, just as a society, we've shifted to a more, what I call a female management style, where the notion of collaboration and equity and lateral creation is becoming more and more and more powerfully rooted in the culture, and that's not even specific to the arts. That's specific to women finally having a voice and being able to sit at the table. So then the table changes. Yeah. But what do you think? I mean, you've been a director for so long. I was a director in other cities, but you were director here for so long.
I'd be curious if the nation, because I thought that a lot of the women that ran major museums, like at the Philadelphia Museum, and that aren't there anymore.
No, but
It's
now
like
there's now
others,
now
maybe
Kelly's the
more.
head of Des Moines. I mean,
What?
They've been replaced by.
Have they?
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Met and
The
MoMA. and
National Gallery of Canada, Australia, Britain, and the United States
All women.
are all women.
Well, that's
Yeah.
great to
Or
know.
were at one time.
All of my former assistants, the curators that worked under me, they're all directors now. And they're all women. They're all women.
Tell us about when you were director of Aspen, when you were appointed.
I was director of the Aspen Art Museum. I was director of the Contemporary Art Center in New Orleans, both those places. And yeah, I don't know which one. I mean, I was young. I was 33 when I became a director, but it was a small regional museum at that point in time. And then I decided I didn't want to wear the clothes you had to wear when you were a director, and I would like to be a curator instead. So I came back to being a curator again. But I admire Chris's wardrobe so much.
I went to a Catholic school and I had to wear uniforms all my life.
You do it so well. I'm sure that got right to the heart of the matter you wanted to get to. Yeah.
I'm going to continue this career track thinking.
Please.
So when Sono brought up this idea of the strata, and Chris explained the ups and downs, I found myself having to argue that Austin's art community is still a young scene, and so our museums are still young. And in this up and down experience that we've gone through is that those that have remained have been strengthened and became the head of the Headless Horseman, and there's still this DIY ethos, and so I felt like the space between the two has widened, And in terms of like opportunities for young creatives, it's like coming out of school, what can I do? Let me work at a museum, or let me work in some sort of organization that will allow me to be creative. But it feels like the only real paying jobs, even though they don't pay that well, it's, you know, it's that top higher tier. And so, because I feel like you've had that experience in the 80s of building the thing, like what is your perspective now that we have?
Yeah, well, I think the
different
bottom
levels?
fell out because Austin got so expensive, and so many artists leave, or well, they're in Lockhart and Pflugerville, and so I mean that's still around, but I think that's something we really have to address: is how can we have more Thornton Roads? We really need a lot more studio space, more more support for artists and smaller art organizations.
I guess I also want to challenge what Leslie said, because I didn't feel like I had opportunities for mentorship, and I feel like that is something that I could probably pick out from artists that are coming from elsewhere and did not study at UT. Like if you were part of UT, you probably did find some sort of mentorship, but if you didn't do that, that mentorship was harder. And even though I went through UT undergrad, I still didn't feel like I had the mentorship that I was seeking. I'm still seeking for my mentor.
Anybody, any volunteers tonight?
Sitting next to Jane.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question for the panel. What Robert was saying I thought was really interesting about, like he talked about swells of activity and building, or almost like in the Taylor Swift parlance, the eras. Like, and I got a little bit of like an 80s era, and then a mid-zeros era, like 2008, and then again in 2000, looks like 2012, 2013, maybe 2000 post-pandemic.
I agree.
Does that feel right? I'd like to ask the panel to talk about, have they seen or do they feel different eras in our community or the art we're making? And are
That was
they
actually
distinct,
one of my
you know?
questions too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, those exact eras. I mean, it's the wave we were talking about over coffee. It builds, and then part of it crashes, and then it builds again, and then part of it crashes. There's through lines that keep going, and I think those through lines keep those swells coming back. Yeah.
You know, the history of the 20th century of modernism is a history of heroes, and maybe we'll say sheroes now too. And so it's individuals who are charismatic and resourceful and creative and determined, and who stay put somewhere for a long enough time to really make something out of what they spawn. That was last century's model for how you build history, basically. And I don't know that we know what this one is yet, except that it clearly involves more than just a single visionary. It involves a team of committed visionaries working together. I've always felt like Austin has the raw material for that, you know. I have never been able to quite crack the nut of what is it that keeps us from doing this times 20 across the community, except for these historical smashes that happen, but they happen everywhere for different reasons.
Seems like we get like 3 out of the 5 things. You had mentioned that Calvin Tompkins wrote an article in the New Yorker a while back, and saying that a strong contemporary, a city that has a strong contemporary art scene has artists, galleries, collectors, critics, and museums
And institutions,
and we get a portion, and we get 3 out of 5, we get 2 out of 4. We haven't ever quite gotten 5.
That's come up numerous times on this show.
Yeah,
we don't with any number of subjects that we started out with.
But I do think, I mean, I think since there is a nationwide crisis of writing, which was talked about the last time, we have to find something else.
Support for
to
writing.
Replace, or to encourage that for people to think and to see and to appreciate or critique what they see.
I might also say that the exercise that you're putting us all through, and you know, again, you all are going back on your histories now and thinking of those moments. It's in hindsight that you realize, oh, that was really wonderful, that thing I did, that thing I saw, that thing I was part of. And so it's these exercises too that can spark and fuel kind of continued, but maybe in a different direction and maybe in a different way, actions. Because I think most of what happens here that's really good is in the heat of the moment. It's an idea with people that are going to make it happen, and there's not enough money, and it's more grassroots, it's more informal, ad hoc, all of that. And how do we turn that now that we have some hindsight, all of us, whether it's 5 years here or 50 years here, how do we turn that into something as solid as we think we'd like it to be? The question is, would we rather it just always be that other ad hoc, informal, spontaneous, passionate thing? In which case, then maybe we just need 50 different clusters of that going on. And how do the old people get involved, you know? I mean, it's like that, because we all get old, right? Yeah, so.
Robert, do you have a perspective?
I do. I think I mentioned at the last show that I'd been approached by some people in the theater community who were all here in Austin creating work through the 90s and the early 2000s. And they are now dispersed around the country, but they continue to stay in touch, and it's important to them to create a book that chronicles what that time was, and they are also in the midst of trying to figure out what was it that made that time so special. So it's a bit of excavation and talking about what was going on then. They've asked me to write it, and as we started preliminary discussions, it's come up again and again how much community there was, how many of these people were working. They were just getting started, but they had mentors. They were learning their craft. The theater companies were open to working with each other, so you had people whose plays were being produced by multiple spaces, directors and actors interacting through different companies. So there was a lot of that, and as I've been trying to pin down an era, it seems to have started more like 92, 93, and then faded away by 2004, 2005, even though some of those same people were still in town, but you had spaces like the Blue Theater that had gone away, and with it went a lot of the indie work that was being generated in that space by whatever companies. I think back to, again, feeling very much like a newbie covering the visual arts scene in the 90s, but then really gearing up and trying to write about it a lot and getting to know the players in the 2000s. I kind of keep coming back to like 2008 as a really peak year for me in terms of who was working, who I interviewed, the shows that I saw. And I think, you know, you can't single out one year. It's building up, you know, 5 or 6 years before that. And then, I don't know, you know, Arturo going away, Art Palace going away. It seems, you know, that there was then a drop off after that. And I'd have to do a lot more research to figure out what it was, but it's almost like performing arts had one decade and then it switches to visual arts, and then, I don't know, maybe it switches back. But yeah, I definitely see that as there were important cycles in those communities.
Now, I don't want to burn these guys out.
Yep,
I got Robert in the wing,
okay.
but I want to just kind of intervene a little bit. Everybody's free to hang out as long as you want. I don't want to wear you guys out too much, so let's take 1 or 2 more, and you're free to hang out as long as the bar's open.
That's the gutter blood way. He's been known to go till 2 or 3 in the morning. Not that you have to do that, but just so you know the door stays open. But Robert.
So my question expands on and also what you were just talking about, the eras or the ebb and flow. Robert had tied it like a cursory examination of the financial world, 2009 collapse in our world. Given your guys, the panel's long view, like it's great to have this reminisce look back as a way to read patterns. Given where we are now, the Dallas-ification of Austin, which is the handle that we like to use, like, you know, don't Dallas my Austin. But really, it's the McDonaldization of Western culture. It's like, there's non-spaces now. So like McDonald's here is the same as McDonald's as every airport looks the same. Given all that, this neutralness all over the country, on top of the political world that we're living in right now. So I'm thinking UT Austin is a direct way. So the gutting of the diversity program, diversity, equity, and inclusion program, just eliminating.
Yeah.
The attack on trans rights, the calcification of people leaving California to Texas are right. People leaving Texas to California are left. Texas is becoming more right. California is becoming more left. So the long view, how do you think we're headed? The arts, Austin arts. In other words, are we running parallel to a financial crisis where things are just going to drop out? Where the cool vibe of Hippie Hollow that you swim in is going to slowly leave, and the shit vibe of AK-47. Sorry.
Could you bring me that bottle? God, I need a refill.
I know.
Who wants to jump in on that one?
Well, there was a time, for many years, where nobody could get a job in Austin. I mean, way before the first boom, and everybody had to leave to get a job. So, I mean, the old days weren't. I mean, we have to keep that always in mind, that everything was always complex, and there was lots of good and bad at the same time. I mean, the arts are part of the culture. So if the culture crashes, so I guess it's something to, I think, just to have resolve. I mean, when I hear people say, oh, they're just so overwhelmed and it's just so bad, and you just think, there have just been times when it's been so much worse. I mean, when you look, I mean, seriously, I mean, and that we have to realize that we have it in us. I mean, we do, and we have to call upon that through art, through making people see art because they feel it. I mean, I think that's the way you speak to people. I mean, that's what we always believe about art, is it's the thing that what melts frozen sea in all of us, you know, that people that even are filled with fury, you know, that you would maybe not be able to have a conversation with, maybe with something like that, it's an attempt to change the conversation anyway. I don't know if it's going to change a lot of minds, but we have to be, I think, on guard and rededicated to what we're doing, because we can't be wusses. I mean, we really can't. I mean, I think it's important. It's important to take a stand and to really be confirmed in the value of what we're doing, and also to try to value what we do. I mean, if we don't value it, nobody else will.
Because, you know, I'm sorry. You know, I think that, you know, artists will always make their way. We always have something to say, and we're going to find a way to say it. And we're always going to fight and push back. Because, you know, I was just like, you know, in New York, you know, this whole thing about alternative spaces that came up in the 70s.
Right.
Because at that time, the only work that was being seen was minimalism. So if you weren't white male minimalist sculpture, you just weren't gonna, your work was gonna get shown. And yet these alternative spaces
Yeah.
came up. And one of them, I mean, it, to me, was just remarkable that one of them was called Jam, just above Midtown in New
Yeah.
York. Which, you know, I had a friend that was in a group show there. You know, he lived in New York. And now the Museum of Modern Art just last year put him in a group show because they were honoring that alternative space. And they were the first space in Manhattan to show the work of Chicanos, you know, blacks, women, and no one else was showing their work, our work. And yet now they're going back and writing that history.
Yeah.
And so that's to me remarkable. And so we just have to, whatever is going on, everybody has their own battle. Every era has it. And
Yeah.
so just keep fighting.
Yeah, I think that's a good, Kevin's had his hand up for a little while. Let's take Kevin and then Charles and then, like I said, you're really welcome to hang out. But we're narrowing, we're coming around here on,
Well, I've heard this sort of like narrative of these eras and these rises and falls and these close calls, and I guess looking back on everything, what was something that you wish happened that didn't come to fruition, and what's something that like you hope happens in the future?
good question.
Wow, that's a great question.
There were going to be 2 fabulous art museum structures. They didn't happen.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
We'll do an architecture talk.
Yes. Okay. I mean, heartbreaking.
Yeah, I would love to see like a unified area for the arts that is
Yeah.
more.
Like a cultural district.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hubs.
So somebody could land and then go experience, and then have a full day, you know, to be a magnet, a destination, like like Marfa or Chelsea or wherever, you know, just something that really draws people in.
Yeah,
So
the
I'd like to
streets
see.
like, you know, go crazy. And then what starts happening is, you know, then you're going to get restaurants or bars, you know, that start to pop up around where people gather, you know, these
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
I would rather take it private, and I'd like to see housing, affordable housing for artists, like they're talking about affordable housing for teachers and
Yeah.
firefighters
Right,
and our essential workers, because if
They are
that's
essential.
provided, everybody goes into themselves and they create from there. I worry about, I've had experience in other cities with, you know, sort of beehive spaces filled with artists who are performing for people that are showing up to watch them do what they do. And it gets really close to that in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
So I'd rather say come back to the private space from which one creates, and the rest of it will just take care of itself, you know? Yeah.
I think we had a great opportunity at one time to make the south shore of Lady Bird Lake into a real arts district. When Palmer Auditorium was being taken over and transformed into the Long Center, they wiped away the Coliseum, which may have been a great idea, but it just sort of had the same vibe that the Armadillo World Headquarters had, which we lost. And what could have been a great little complex with maybe a rebuilt Dougherty Arts Center or a replacement for the Dougherty and the Long Center, and you know, when the opera had its building right there on 5th and Barton Springs Road. And you had all sorts of weird, funky little spaces that then got built into generic city office buildings and now apartment towers and condos. I would have just loved to have seen a funky little South Bank that could have represented all the different kinds of high and low cultural scenes that
And pet
Austin
culture
has.
too.
Yeah.
Pet. Yeah.
And this is a question. I live near the Mueller development, and sometimes I ride my bike on the south side, and it looks like there's a complex that's being opened that is an arts, intended to be an arts complex. Has anyone else seen or know anything about that?
Near the Doherty?
No.
No.
Near
Mueller.
It's on the, it's
On
on,
airport, off airport.
It's on the south side of the Mueller development. I'll investigate that and report back. Yeah. No, this is on the, it's on the other side. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm don't know. It's near where Country goes.
Okay.
Close to them.
Yeah.
So,
right along
Maynard.
that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If, I just wondered if anyone else had noticed it. I just noticed the signage and I was curious.
Is it
I'll
part
check
of
into
Mueller?
it. No, it isn't. It's
On the opposite.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
No, it's not where. There's
Yeah.
a
But in
restaurant
those
there, but it's
apartments,
near.
that's where Contigo was?
It's.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Let's get on Google Maps and narrow it
This is
down.
how Austinites give direction, right?
Yeah.
Should we back up to why things didn't happen?
Studio, artwork space.
Yeah.
I live over there, and I think it's a housing development that's being developed, and Raisin in the Sun is doing a lot of art.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So Charles, I wanna give you a chance to.
Well, it was just in response to Robert's call about desperation within the arts and all of that stuff. And I was reading Jack Whitten's Notes from the Woodshed. It's
Yeah.
his autobiography. It's an amazing book if you can ever get a hold of it. But he, in there, he was sharing after Dr. King was murdered, and he was with other artists, and they were in the tavern going freaking out, and George Segal, the sculptor Segal was there. Segal, sorry.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're all gonna go back to our studios and we're gonna just go back and do our work, because that's where our message will be most powerfully strengthened, is there, and be ourselves within our art, and take that desperation and channel that energy into our work and make that, because that's how you win, is by being yourself through all of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that
I would
can answer.
I would like to double down on that with this idea, and we talked earlier about when I had a little prep group here, like, about the cautions of reviewing the history and saying it was better then than it is now,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
ever will be.
Yeah.
And I think that's, as we talked about, it's like it's incorrect.
It was different. It's incorrect.
It's just different.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah, but touching on that, but then also touching on the idea of people are the thread, people are the things that keep things going. I mean, look at the people in the room.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, look at the people in the room, for real.
yeah, it's the
I mean-
Sono era. We're in the Sono
It's
era.
Wow, pretty good.
No, I agree with you. People in the room are amazing. I also,
But you, I mean, I don't want to. That's not a trivial thing. It's a real thing. You have brought this group together, and amen to that. That's I want. I really.
Sure. Thank you.
It's serious.
Thank you. You're making me red. I'm gonna match you. I think we should wrap it up. I'm getting a little tired myself. But I also think this is a great place to end, and I also really appreciated what you said in response, because it is true that it's just different, and you've also said that so many times, Philip. You're like, it's a team sport, But I just want to thank all of you for being here, and please feel free to hang out if you'd like, and thank you guys. You're fantastic. I'm in awe. I'm like flabbergasted.
Well done.
Good job.
Good job. You did a good job.